Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. My name's Adrienne Herbert. I am a wellbeing coach and author and host for today's Be Empowered event with NatWest Group. And I'm going to be joined by a panel of three fabulous women, and we're going to be talking you through today all about getting started, building your profile, how important it is to remain self-motivated and have a positive mindset, and also top tips for preparation and interviews. So firstly, I'd love to welcome my panelists, and if you could each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your career journey with NatWest Group. It'd be great to start with you, please, Nida.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Adrienne. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Empowered event. So my name's Nida Hannon, and I currently work in the embedding purpose team in sustainable banking. So work with colleagues across the bank and external partners to cultivate our purpose-driven strategy. I actually joined the bank as an intern in 2018 on the Change in Business Solutions programme. And then I loved it so much that I then rejoined as a graduate in 2019. So I completed 3 6-month rotations on the graduate scheme, and then I secured a permanent role in my current team in March last year.
Great, thank you. And next, Honey, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Honey Adjuan. I currently head up the capital markets technology team in the bank. I joined the bank as a director of underwriting in our asset-based lending team within the commercial arm of the bank, then moved to head up the product. And then I moved into innovation, then I moved into technology. So now I head up the capital markets technology team, as I said previously. So I've spent 7 years in the bank, and it's given me an opportunity to try on several hats and adapt my career and be flexible.
Great. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And last but not least, Leah, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Bracker, and I'm an internal communications manager. I moved into this role last summer after spending the first 8 years of my career in recruitment. I joined NatWest Group in 2015 after working previously in a recruitment agency after graduating from university, worked in a few different roles across the team, and then decided to try something new with communications last year. Alongside my day job, I'm also one of 3 global co-chairs for the NatWest Group Gender Network. We run activities, events and initiatives to support gender equality at NatWest Group, and we've got around 10,000 members.
Brilliant. Thank you. So as I said, 3 absolutely brilliant women with so much insight to share. So I'm going to dive straight in with my first question, which is for you, Nida. So you mentioned that I suppose a lot of people on the call are in maybe in a similar position to you were recently when you were, I guess, a graduate and also in joining NatWest Group. So could you tell us about when you were at university, what kind of things did you do? What did you approach in terms of building your CV and getting experience?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the key takeaway that I had is about growing your network and keeping it really diverse. So learning from people across different sectors and different organizations who naturally have different personalities and experiences really helped me to understand what sort of experiences I wanted to create for myself in work experience. And I think don't be too afraid if you feel like you're a little bit behind or anything already, because it's fine. As long as you have those connections, you'll be absolutely fine, and they'll really help you once you start to work as well. And I think one way which you can do that, which is a bit different now, obviously, given a lot of things are virtual, but virtual career fairs, if there's any sort of external networking conferences or talks or areas of interest that you have a genuine interest in, reach out to those people, reach out to those panelists on LinkedIn and ask them about their experiences and whether there's any work experience that they can offer as well. And I think lastly is just keeping an open mind as well. So not shoehorning yourself into one specific area of work experience when you're at university, because it's such an amazing time to really learn from a huge range of people and discover what you want to do. So I think really use that to your advantage and be flexible in the experiences that you look for.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember. As you said, it's not just, you might have almost like assumptions or an idea of what things you need to get experience in, but I think you're totally right. Having a diverse skills and network is really, really important, and those practical things. So yeah, reaching out, whether that is via LinkedIn or via email. I think there's definitely pros and cons now to the virtual world. So would you say that when it comes to reaching out to people online, any top tips there, and kind of how many how many times do you think it's okay to maybe message or email the same person, or should people aim to spread the net far and wide and email lots of different people?
I think we obviously have to be conscious of people who spend so much time online now, and it's about making yourself obviously open to connections, but also you have to put those boundaries in place. I think just exercising respect for people's time and for their energy. I think if you reach out once or twice and you don't get a response, it might be worth looking within that person's connections and see if there's anyone else who may be able to help you. I think contacting early careers. So, for example, we have an early careers centre of excellence as well, and something similar in different organisations might be the best route in, because they'll have more specialist advice for you. But I think also learning from your peers is something which is kind of underrated. So if you attend something at university and you see other people there who maybe you haven't spoken to, but you think, oh, actually, they've got similar interests to me, I think it's quite good to network that way. And you're both going to learn from each other, or whether you're a group of people, you can all learn from each other. So I think playing it the right way, which is respectful to people's time, but also in a way which helps you, is like the key balance, which can probably be quite tricky to nail at the moment because we're all still adjusting. But hopefully, with time, we can get the right balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And Leah, I'd love to hear from you, because you mentioned in your introduction that you are the co-chair of the NatWest Group Gender Network. So how is your involvement with that network? Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's helped you and your profile?
Yes, absolutely. So I became involved in the network initially after taking part in our annual development programme that we do for junior women that are looking to progress their careers. And I'd been in the bank already for a couple of years, and it was the first time that I'd really been exposed to and worked with people outside my immediate team or business area. So from all the different parts of the bank, and NatWest is huge. We've got 50,000 plus employees. And I think I didn't really appreciate that until doing a program like this. And because of that, I thought, you know what, I really want to get more involved in this network. So through that was obviously building my profile through growing that network and meeting people from different parts of the bank, started volunteering and helping out with bits and pieces here and there. And 5 years on, obviously that's evolved. I'm now in one of our co-chair roles. And I think from that perspective, we are very much seen as experts in terms of the area that we support, which is gender equality. So people from different parts of the organisation will come to us because they want our advice or guidance on certain topics, or to come along and just speak to their teams about who we are and what we do. And I think the other thing that's been really beneficial, thinking about my profile, is that through this role, we have the opportunity to meet regularly with our CEO, executives from across the group, our executive sponsor, and to be part of groups that I think I wouldn't necessarily be part of otherwise. So that's been really great to go alongside my day job as well.
Yeah, I bet. I think it is so important, those interactions where, as you said, you might not directly work with that person or get an opportunity to even have a conversation with them or interact with them and potentially learn from them if it wasn't for those kind of networks. So that sounds fantastic. And Honey, I know that you are also involved in a network. You're global co-chair of the Black Professionals Network. So how has that helped you and your career?
Well, so I think what's really important for a lot of people to note is that we have quite a lot of employee-led networks in the organization, and that's to really, really build an inclusive culture. So for the Black Professionals Network, which I also founded, the purpose of that network is to encourage psychological safety and provide well-being support and career development guidance to Black colleagues across the bank. So we do that by creating a safe space for them to share their unique lived experiences, develop their careers, and uplift their local communities. And we also look to ensure that we create an even more racially open and inclusive, progressive culture within NatWest. And the impact it's had on my career is the fact that I have a broader network of colleagues across all levels of the bank. And what is really, really important, I think, also is the fact that from a well-being perspective, having a support network of people who look like you and understand your lived experience is so important. And the Black Professionals Network enables me and a lot of our members to do so. And similar to what Leah was talking about, we get to actually talk to colleagues across the bank, senior leaders across the bank, in terms of advising them on how to make their teams more diverse, more inclusive, and ensuring that when they're going out to recruit, they're looking across a broad range of different characteristics and understanding that talent doesn't come in one shape or form. It is very, very expansive. So that has really helped in my career, but also from a well-being and support perspective, it's been great. And I've been able to mentor and coach a number of Black colleagues within the organization, so they're also able to develop their career as well.
Great. It sounds fantastic. And I think it's so important that, there is visibility within the bank, but also for people who, graduates, young people, students, to look and to see these networks and to see actually that there is a place for me in the bank, and people who, as you said, all different, what we look like, but also to understand that emotional support and that well-being support is there. It is so important. It's fantastic. So speaking of well-being, I think at the moment there has been so much, for all of us, so much change in the last few years with the pandemic, and it's changed how we work, how we live, how we interact. And so for students and for young people, it's, I think a lot of the individual, the things you have to do by yourself and not being able to interact and to be in the environment with people, it can be very, very difficult for people to stay self-motivated. And motivation is something that I talk about a lot and often get a lot of questions about. So I'd love to hear your advice on how young people at the moment can stay self-motivated through this process of uncertainty and at the start of their career. Leah, do you want to go first?
Sure. So great question. I think it's something that, first of all, I would just say it's okay to feel that way. I think a lot of people give themselves a hard time if they're not at 100% all day, every day. And actually, that won't help you get out of that cycle. So it's okay to have moments where you just feel like, a bit demotivated, or you're not sure what to do next. I think what I do and what I would certainly advise is reach out to your support network. We've talked about it already, but it's really important because other people can be really helpful in trying to kind of get you out of that or give you a different perspective, or when they're, able to counteract some of the potential negative thinking that you might have or might be feeling. So definitely that. And I would also say just make sure not to put too much pressure on. It's okay not to be going at something all the time. Make sure that you're balancing things that, if you're looking at jobs or future careers and all of that, don't do that all the time. Make sure you're balancing that with things that you enjoy and that make you feel good, because that will then have a knock-on impact on your overall motivation, how you feel. So that's something I certainly tell myself. And a big one for me this year is, I love my job, but actually let's make sure that I'm also focusing on the things outside my job, because if I'm happy in my home life, I'll probably also then be happy in my work life as well.
Yeah, great advice. And especially as not putting too much pressure on. Sometimes we can write out a long list of things and feel a bit overwhelmed. And I think when it comes to motivation, as I said, lots of people ask me, how can I stay motivated? I just, we can't feel every single day, proactive, and especially if we've been reaching out and we haven't heard back. So I think just doing one thing at least each day, and kind of, even if you just circle the one thing on the list, what's one thing I can do today, one email I could send, or one podcast I could listen to, or one chapter of a book I could read, just one thing each day, so you're moving in the right direction without feeling overwhelmed with all the things that you have to do. And Nida, I'd love to hear from you about, I suppose, within motivation and well-being, there's often an element of self-confidence, and unfortunately, I feel like more for women than this idea of not having enough experience yet, or lacking self-confidence, or maybe reading something and thinking, actually, I'm not good enough to apply for that yet. What would your advice be to anyone who's feeling like that?
I think just go for it. I think one thing which I've learned, and I'm glad I learned it quite early on in my career, and again, that's from a really good network that I've had around me, is to just apply for it. And like you said, Adrian, unfortunately, it is a lot of the time women who doubt themselves more so. But it's very, very, very likely that you're highly skilled, you're highly competent, and also you've got the drive and the passion to be able to develop those skills that maybe you haven't got those experiences for yet. I think one thing which really helped me on the graduate scheme, and I really recommend, and I wish I did at university, is starting to keep a log of experiences or pieces of work I've done and the skills I developed when I did it. Because when it comes to interviews, a lot of them are, you know, competency based and situational. So name a time when you did this, or when you demonstrated this skill, for example. So I think even if you have a few examples of that, and they may not be as thorough and developed as someone who's been in their career for, say, 10 years, you've still got that spark that you can really develop and go off. And I think that's something which is really important. And I still see it sometimes. I look at roles and I think, oh, will I be able to apply for that in 2 years? How can I start to build my skills up now and have that conversation with my manager to say, look, I want to be here in a couple of years' time. Please, can we make these opportunities? And I know it's a bit harder when you're a student, but through the work experiences you do, even if you do volunteering, for example, there's always ways where you can start to develop those experiences. But I think definitely keeping a note of them, because there's so much going on when you're a student. So just make sure you keep a note of it and celebrate the small wins. Definitely. Yeah, just believe in yourself. I know it sounds so cheesy, but just celebrating those small wins will really help you to keep positive and build your confidence.
Yeah, I really like the idea of documenting and looking back and saying, actually, these are things that I've done before, and drawing on that skill and that experience. You're totally right. Reading that and reminding yourself, you did that work, you achieved those things, and it's not, you know, fake it to make it. I really dislike that idea that, like, you know, just fake confidence. It's like, no, actually, that can give you, I guess, a real kind of proof to say, actually, these are the things that I've done before, and that can help to boost your confidence. So, Honey, you mentioned that you mentor, and what advice would you give to young people and students about that, being proactive and staying self-motivated?
It's quite interesting, actually, because I was also one of the progenitors of the social mobility apprenticeship program in the organization. And what is interesting is that I have so many conversations with young people. And the thing I always tell everyone is to be motivated about the things you want to achieve. The first thing is to think of self. You're not in competition with anybody. It's about what you want to achieve, what you feel happy with, the type of person you want to be. So the key thing is, don't compare yourself to others. Your journey is different, and your journey is the exact right journey for you. So that means it's very much about looking at what makes you happy, what are the things you want to achieve, and just focusing on those things. But whilst you're also focusing on those things, remember that the biggest thing for you is your joy, your fun. So regardless of how hard you push yourself to achieve things, if you're not enjoying it, what's the value? So you need to know it's just to you. You're not competing with anyone else, and find the joy and the fun in the things that you want to do and achieve.
Yes, I love that, the joy. And also, you know, you can't underestimate the impact that has on others as well. So whether that's someone that you're meeting for the first time, the interaction that you have, or if it's people that you're working alongside, you know, that are in your team, you know, I think it's really important that people remember that, actually, that bringing your real self, as you said, your joy, your energy, your personality, bringing that, and not thinking, oh, you know, I think I definitely was guilty of that maybe years ago when I was, I'm in my 30s now, but when I was maybe, you know, teenager, young, early 20s, of thinking, oh, I need to present in this way, or I need to, you know, seem professional in this way. When actually, when you learn that you can be yourself, and you can, of course, it's still professional, but bringing yourself and your energy is really, really important. And actually, it's invaluable, because people want to work with real people. Great. So the next thing I want to talk about, of course, is the real practical stuff around interviews. So interviews can be nerve-wracking, whether they are in real life, whether they're virtual. So I'd love to, maybe I'll start with you, Leah. I know we've talked a little bit before about this. What advice would you give firstly for people who feel like, okay, I feel nervous, I've done some preparation, but then when I'm in the setting, the nerves get the better of me?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing that I've learned, having been through interviews myself over the years, but also working in recruitment for 8 years, so kind of supporting a lot of people through that process, it's okay to feel nervous. And actually, I would go as far as to say, if you don't feel nervous, it might be that perhaps you don't want that job quite as much as you think. I think it's completely normal because it means that you care. That's why you get nervous, because you're thinking, and I think a lot of it can be the fear of the unknown, but ultimately that's how the process works. I think preparation is absolutely key. It's an obvious one, but it is so key, because if you've done as much preparation as you can and you know that you've prepared as much as possible, really, there's nothing huge that you should worry about, because there shouldn't be anything come up that's going to be that you're not prepared for and not prepared to answer. I think two things that I always try to remind people of is your interviewers, they want you to do well. Nobody wants to be at the other side of an interview and put you under loads of pressure and make sure, try and have you have a negative experience. That's not how it works. They want you to do well. They want to bring the best out in you. And the other thing I would say is, the fact that you've got the interview is already fantastic. They would not be interviewing you if they didn't think you could do the job. I hear from so many people that say to me, I've got the interview, but I don't think I've got the right skills or the experience. And I'm saying, as someone from the other side who did work in that, I'm not going to spend time interviewing you if I don't think there's a chance you can do the job, because frankly, that would be a waste of that person's time or my time. So the fact that you're there is fantastic. It means that they think that you can do the job. They're just looking to bring some of that to life and get to know you a bit better. So I think that advice that you gave a second ago about being genuine and being yourself, make sure you prepare. You can't go wrong. And it's okay to feel nervous.
Great advice, thank you. And one thing I'd love to add to that is to practice. It sounds, sometimes we just go through things in our head and we can think and think and think, but actually practice, there's such benefit in that. You don't have to do it in front of anybody else, but just actually, sit in the place where you're going to sit, look at, maybe even put on what you're going to wear and just practice so that you feel like it's not, you've had your kind of dress rehearsal maybe. And Nida, you joined NatWest Group graduate program in 2019. So can you tell us about the application process?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, it's a little bit different now with the virtual sense of everything, but I think the fundamentals of it are still the same. So you start the application process, application form. One tip I'd give when you're doing applications is save yourself the trouble of thinking back to everything you've done and try to update your CV regularly. So just keeping track of everything, that makes it a lot easier. And then if you're successful, you do the online test. So they're sort of like situational judgment tests. They don't take too long at all. I think it's like half an hour. And it brings in elements of like numerical and logical reasoning. So using your skills to think about how you'd solve a problem and how you'd go about it. Don't overthink them. I think sometimes I used to think, God, they're trying to catch me out, but just don't overthink them. And then there's a video interview which has like motivational, competency-based and scenario-based questions. And again, like Adrian said, I definitely recommend just practicing some questions, practicing some sort of standard interview questions as well. Just talking to yourself before you do it, because I know sometimes it can feel a bit crazy when you're recording yourself. I had to do it this morning for something else at work, but just doing a warm-up beforehand really helps. And then there's the virtual assessment centre, which would have your competency-based interview. And then there's a group exercise as well, and individual tasks. So it can be anything depending on the day, and you'll be with a mix of different people. So I think just be prepared, make sure that you shine through with your own personality. And then if you're successful, they let you know within a week normally.
Gosh, you see, I can see why people are nervous, Nida, because as you're saying, all the different steps and the different things, and it can sound like a lot and it can be overwhelming. So I think if you are hearing that and thinking, oh my gosh, that's making me more nervous, then don't worry. As we said, these things are things that you can influence. So being prepared, rehearsing, practicing, and also just being really honest on the day. Honey, what would you say about advice about if you don't know? So let's say, for example, you're asked a question and you don't know. I think people are often afraid to admit and say, actually, I don't know. Maybe I could, go away and find out. Is it best to kind of make something up? What would you suggest if you do find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, I actually don't know what to say?
So please don't make anything up.
Yeah.
What I'll suggest actually is you could always reframe the question. You could say you don't know. However, in these circumstances that you may have experience of, you give that. So an example could be, oh God, putting me on the spot now. If, for instance, you've never had bread before and someone asks you about bread, you may say, oh, I don't know about bread, but I know it's a carbohydrate. I have had rice, and these are the things about rice, you know? So there's nothing wrong with not knowing, but I suppose there's sometimes that you could look to maybe provide more information on things that you know that are similar to the question asked. No one expects you to come into an interview having all the answers. It's more about how you project what you know, how you interact with people, and your passion for joining an organization such as ours, which has purpose at its core as well.
Great. Well, I wanted to ask that question because I do think it comes up and people think about it and they go, oh gosh, what worst case scenario? If they ask me a question, I had no idea. Should I just, try and wing it? And like you say, it's not good, is it, to kind of think, oh, I'll just make something up, especially because also like, I think I heard somebody on the radio recently talking about this, and they said that they had applied for a job and they didn't read it properly. And it said that they needed to speak Spanish, and they kind of, I think they ticked the box or something. And so it was in the interview when they were like asked to speak Spanish or read something, and suddenly they were like, I'll just give it a go. And they basically tried to speak Spanish for the first time in their life during the interview. Not a situation that I think any of us would want to be in.
At all.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to encourage all the participants to drop any questions that you might have for us in the Q&A box, and I can put them over to our panelists. So whilst we're waiting for some questions to come through, speaking of questions, we talked then about answers and, having the answers prepared, being prepared. But what are some questions that maybe you should be asking or you could ask in that process? I think, Leah, you mentioned, working in recruitment for a long time. What kind of, what would you be impressed by if someone came into their interview with questions for you?
Yeah, I think some great ones to ask are about what the team and the culture is like. And I think it's great because it shows that you're interested, but it's also great for you because the other thing to remember with an interview, it is a two-way process. It can feel very much one-sided, but actually the interview is as much your opportunity to find out, is this the role I want? Is this the type of team and culture that I want to work in? So asking a question like that is great because they'll hopefully then paint a bit more of a picture and give you a feel for that. I think also asking what the vision for the role that you're interviewing for might be over the next 12 months, or, if I was to be successful, what would you initially see me working on for the first 3 to 6 months, or what would I be doing to get started? Practical things that, again, just show that you've taken the time to really understand what the role is, but want to know how that would then look, or what the longer term, medium to longer term vision of the team. So really, I think related to some of that kind of softer organizational piece, because I think that a lot of employers have now shifted. It really is a lot less about specific experience and more about the person, the character, their values, and how that fits in with the culture. So I think asking questions around that is really positive.
Great, thank you. And I have a question here from Charlotte. So thank you, Charlotte, for asking and submitting your question. And it says, as employees in NatWest, can you see the values of NatWest in your day-to-day experiences? So everyone's nodding. Who would like to go?
Absolutely. And that is a great question to also ask in an interview. Because the thing is, when you're thinking about values of an organization, you also need to think about how it aligns to your values. And I would actually say it's almost 100% aligned in this organization. And when you look at it, it's about the fact that we're putting our customers first. We're not putting profits first. Our purpose as an organization is to champion potential and also help people, family, and businesses to thrive. And everything I do in terms of my day-to-day, particularly in technology, is to enable that. Is how can we make this simpler for our customers? How can we make it easier for our customers? And not only that, we also focus on the environment as well in terms of how do we as an organization be great corporate citizens? What are we doing to ensure sustainability? So all those things really align with my values. And I think anyone who actually thinks from that perspective would love working in this organization. So that's my explanation of how the organization and my values really, really align. And I can see demonstrated in our day-to-day activities.
Great, thank you. Anyone else like to add, Nida or Leah?
Yeah, I would just say I completely echo everything Honey says. I think for me, when I first joined the organisation, and a lot's changed in the 6-7 years that I've been here, but the thing that really shone through everything is what's the best thing for our customer. As Honey said, that's now evolved to customers, communities, and broader than that. But when you're faced with difficult business decisions, or as is bound to happen when you work in a team, people have different opinions and you're trying to work through, well, how do we get to the bottom of this? I really do see this in practice is, okay, let's just take ourselves or what we might want out of it. What's the best thing for the end user, our customer? And to work somewhere like that culturally really is fantastic. I also think that during we're going back nearly 2 years now, but during the first lockdown, when things were really difficult, I saw the decisions that were being made by the bank in terms of our customers, but also in terms of our colleagues. What's the right thing to do for people in this really difficult time? And I think that certainly when you compared it to a lot of other organisations, NatWest Group really were going a lot further in terms of making sure they were looking after people. There were, you can imagine, so many people that couldn't work because they're at home with families and the difficulties, and the amount of support that was available for every single person really was incredible. And I think that just made me feel so proud to work for an organisation like that actually is looking as much internally at their people as externally.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. And as you said, it's in the last 2 years, I think it's probably really highlighted more than ever how important it is to work in an organisation like that, and also to work with people who support you and that you can be honest and open with. I think something I'd like to ask you all about is feedback. Now, even the fact that we're all talking about values, that can be quite a difficult thing, especially when you're young, to think, well, actually, what are my values? And, unless you spend the time, I often encourage people to actually spend the time, really, interrogate this, write things down. It's, it can be quite easy to just think off the top of your head, I value community, or I value things, but actually really interrogate, like, what are the most important things to you? And if you can't figure that out, then one way could be to, think about what evokes a feeling in you, whether that's a feeling that's excitement and energy, or whether that's a feeling of frustration. If it's something that you always get kind of, you rant about, that often is a sign as well that you're passionate about it. So try and figure out what your values are by those kind of signs, but also by getting feedback. So having a conversation with someone else and saying, okay, well, what things have you seen me demonstrate that you think are my strengths? Or actually, what are my blind spots and my weaknesses, and something that I might not be aware of? Like, how do I come across in that setting when I'm having a communication in a team, or when I'm in a confrontation with somebody, like having a thoughtful disagreement? How do you present as your best, and how are you perceived? So I think getting feedback, it can be great. So I guess with this kind of process, with interviews, and obviously things are virtual and people are quite time poor, what would be the best way? Nida, I'd love to ask you, what would be the best way and your advice for people to get feedback?
Yeah, I think it's quite challenging, because like friends of mine as well who have recently graduated, it's difficult to actually get that feedback. I think if you can, Leah, please tell me if I'm wrong, but can you ask within the interview? I don't know if there's anything that you can ask there. I think trying to be more self-aware, which is quite hard to do, but it's a really good practice to practice self-awareness and try and gauge, okay, what would I have done differently there, or what did I do really well as well? I think it's really easy to just focus on the critical things, like the things that you could have improved on, but also when did I feel really confident, really passionate? Like, when did my eyes light up in that interview? How can I capture that and take that to the next one? And how can I actually get that feedback on myself? I think it is difficult to, obviously employers are interviewing a lot of people, it is difficult to get that feedback. So my only mitigation that I can really recommend is trying to practice that self-reflection. But I think, Leah, probably you have some better ideas from like the recruitment side.
Yeah, I think self-reflection is great. And actually I find when you have an interview, sometimes you almost go into autopilot, and then someone says to you after, how was it? What did they ask you? And you almost go, oh my gosh, and they asked me this, but then I can't remember that question because you're so absorbed. And the more time that passes, the more you'll forget. So actually, I would say if you're interviewing, take some time quickly when you're out of the interview to jot down the things that you think were really key for you to remember. What were the things you answered well? Was there anything that came up that you felt maybe you could have answered differently or didn't know the answer to? I always think, my mum always said this to me and it stuck with me forever, but if you don't ask, you don't get. The worst someone can do is say, actually, we're not in a position to share that feedback with you. And I think that's the other thing is I would like to think, but I know that it's not the case. Lots of employers should be giving feedback after every single assessment or interview. Unfortunately, they don't, but don't be afraid to ask. Send an email, send a follow-up. If you haven't had that back, send it again. You've committed your time to go in and interview with them. You have a right to request that feedback for your own ongoing development. So don't be afraid to ask if you haven't got it. And then just super quickly, because that reminded me when you were speaking, Nida, another great question to ask at the end of an interview, particularly if they've actually answered everything you were going to ask. Is there anything else that you would like to know that we haven't had time to cover? Is a great one, because then you've always got at least one question, because they might talk about the other things you had lined up, and it gives them an opportunity to revisit something that they may have a question mark on or want to know more. So just thought I'd pop that in there as well.
Great advice. Thank you. Write that one down, have it there on the piece of paper, ready for the end. So we have a raised hand from Zidane. So Zidane, would you like to go off mute and ask us your question?
Sure. Do you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Sure. First, I'd like to thank everyone for taking their time to speak today and sharing your insights. It's been really helpful. I was just kind of interested in following on that previous question where you spoke about the culture and values. I'd just be interested in hearing why you specifically wanted to join NatWest and your specific roles, and just be interested in everyone speaking on that.
I'm happy to go if you want. So my role now at the moment is right at the core of our purpose-led strategy, so in the embedding purpose team. And to be completely honest with you, when I first joined the bank, I thought the thing that's really keeping me here is the people, because the culture, the friendliness, the willingness to actually help you learn and develop, I think that's a real asset of NatWest. And the early careers team are incredible at doing that, but also just the general wider population within NatWest Group. Everyone will take the time to talk to you and help you and help you lift you up as well. I think the values really came into play for me when we launched our purpose-led strategy in 2020 now. So that was like a real, actually, I see myself here long term. Like I can have a direct impact on wider society, but also direct impact on colleagues as well. So I think finding somewhere which allows you to really nurture your own values and to help you explore, but also, Honey, I think you mentioned earlier about that psychological safety. That's really, really important. And I think especially when you're a young person, I still find it in certain meetings. I think, should I say that? Should I challenge that? But it's really important to do because you don't want to lose that part of yourself, because that's like what makes you stand out. So I think the values that we have now and changing values are really, really important for prospective people like you guys to make it a real asset for us to attract that right kind of purpose-driven talent and colleagues across the bank. I hope that helped.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'll I suppose just from my perspective, I think when I first joined the bank, it was quite a different time. So there had been the financial crisis. We were still RBS at the time, and there was a lot of legacy issues that we were dealing with. But actually, when I was researching the bank and I was seeing this real focus on the customer and the acknowledgement to say, the organization we were before, we did make mistakes. We acknowledge that. This is how we're changing. This is what we're going to do. And I thought, wow, that sounds like an organization that's really going somewhere forward, looking to the future. And I wanted to be part of it. And I've seen that evolve so much since I've been here. I think last summer, when I came to a bit of a juncture in my career, because I'd worked in recruitment for 8 years, working in communications is quite different. And I thought, do I take this move and do something else? And the thing that really appealed to me about my current role, it's internal communication. So my job is essentially taking all of the amazing work that we do across the organization and communicating that to people internally to show them how we're living our values. What are we doing with our customers? Listen to these great case studies or pieces of news that our relationship managers might be doing with a customer in Bristol or someone that's a big international corporate, taking that and telling that story to people to really showcase this is what we do as an organization and this is the reach and the impact that we have. And that's, I suppose, why I took my particular role, and being able to do that is such a wonderful position to be in, because not only do I get to see that, I get to share that with people. And in turn, for the colleagues working in the bank to see that can be very motivating in terms of wanting to work here and seeing what we do in practice.
And I'm going to be really, really short because I touched on it earlier. I got into banking about quite some time ago, maybe 15, 17 years ago. And the one organization I did not want to work for was RBS or NatWest. I did not like the culture from the outside. Subsequently, about 8 years ago, I had the opportunity to work with a number of people within RBS as it was known, and I thought, this is the organization I wanted to work for. So imagine that journey from 15, 17 years ago to about 7 years ago, and me going, I want to work for this organization. And not only did I want to work for them, I wanted to work for them because we were really, really focused on the customer. In the last 2-3 years, the focus on community, the focus on our purpose has made me even more proud that I'm working for this organization. And when you look at it, when I look at it in terms of my day-to-day role, a key part is the fact that in technology for capital markets, which is the investment banking arm of the bank, there's a focus on ensuring that we are at the front when it comes to ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. So ensuring that we get the right data so we're able to provide products to our customers that align with our values, with our purpose in terms of sustainability. So that's one direct line. There are other things that we also do in terms of through employee-led networks and other areas of the bank where we focus on financial literacy for our customers so they're able to make the right decisions and they're empowered to do so. So there are a number of things that I can see specifically, and you can actually quantify the impact we're having on wider society, on our customers, and on our colleagues as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I don't work at NatWest, but after this event, honestly, I'm going to wish that I did. So we are running out of time, sadly. I have one more fantastic question here that I'm going to share. And that is, it's been submitted anonymously, and it says, often I'm asked about where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? And I find that a very difficult question to answer. So what advice do you have? Now, I think, before when I talked about honesty and saying, I don't know, I'd love to hear, maybe Leah, I know you worked in recruitment, so maybe I'll just go to you on this one before I share my last closing thought on this.
Yeah, so for me, actually, I get asked this question a lot as well, and maybe slightly controversial statement, but I think it's quite an old-fashioned question, because actually 3 to 5 years is a really long time. If you're early on in your career, how are you supposed to necessarily know what you're going to be doing in 3 or 5 years? Because you've not even started yet, or you might have dipped your toe into the water of some things, but you don't know how things will change. If someone said to me 5 years ago, in 5 years' time, this is what you'll be doing, I would have laughed, because actually everything I'm doing, I wasn't even involved with 5 years ago. What I would say is, if you're ever asked that question, is to actually, don't feel forced to say something. When I'm asked that question, my response is also, I say that what I do know is this: I'm really enjoying XYZ with what I'm doing. These are the things that I'm really passionate about. I do know that in 5 years' time, or in my career, I would like to progress to a more senior level. But actually, for me, what I really enjoy now is learning new challenges, new experiences, building my experience, and looking at what opportunities may come from that. So I think it's okay. And equally, what I would say is, if you're sat there and you have got the next 5 years planned out, that's absolutely great as well. Different people work in different ways, and there's nothing wrong with that too. But just to say as well, if you don't have that, it's okay, and it's okay to say so.
Yes, I think that's great advice. It's very similar to what I was going to share as well. It's really around, the future, as we know at the moment. Yes, it's uncertain, it's undefined. And I think you're right. If someone asked me that question and I just said, I don't know, that doesn't tell them much about me. But if someone asked me that question and I said, I don't know specifically exactly the role, but I know that, as you mentioned, I'm committed to lifelong learning. I'm ambitious and I'm passionate, and I enjoy working in this environment, or I enjoy working with these kinds of people. Then, of course, you don't have to have an exact journey planned out, but I think that's really valuable. And even, not just saying that to somebody else just because they've asked you, but actually remind yourself of that. We've talked a lot about the different practical things that you can do and reflection and how important that is, and in terms of staying self-motivated. And that is something that, as a motivator, I would love to share with all of you, is that you really don't know what is possible for yourself and for your future. So please don't limit it. Don't limit your ambition. Commit to, doing all of the things that we've said, and just give it your best shot. So thank you to all of my wonderful panelists. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions. That is all we have time for. And thank you again, everybody, Nida, Leah and Honey. It was absolutely brilliant. And as I said, I wish myself that I worked at NatWest after listening to all of the wonderful insights you've shared.